Hey everybody, what's going on? Juan here, welcome back to the channel, and for this video, we're going to be looking to recreate the most authentic experience possible when it comes to playing your favorite past consoles in something like a RetroPie emulator via Windows or Mac, because we're going to be taking a look at the RetroPower 5 USB classic controller package available on Amazon and other outlets. And look at what we have. For around $40, it comes with 5 controllers including NES, Super Nintendo, N64, Sega Genesis, PlayStation 2, as well as it comes with a 6-foot USB extension cable. A friend of ours, Taino, had it, and I'm like, can I please borrow it because it looks so interesting, because what better way to play on something like an emulator than by playing with a similar controllers, especially when you look at something like N64, which has a very unique design. So we're going to be taking a look and judging these controllers based on how they look, how they feel, and obviously, how do they actually play? So when you actually get the emulator going, do they feel responsive? Are they worth trying? It is supposed to be plug and play, so we're going to put that in practice. So if you've actually gotten yourself a RetroPower controller package, I would love to know, so let me know in the comment section of this video. So let's kick things off first by talking about the NES controller, and with this one I used the Higgin emulator and I played a little bit of Mega Man 2. But first, let's talk about the actual controller and how it looks. And I mean, look at the thing, it's beautiful. Dare I say that with the exception of the RetroPower logo, a lot of people would probably have a hard time defining the differences between the original one and this one. Talking first about the D-pad, it felt very nice and responsive, and I had no problem whatsoever playing Mega Man 2, aside from, actually having skill. The B and A buttons are very nice and responsive as well. They're very nice and clicky, they're not mushy, and that to me was a very big concern, and I did not have that problem with this controller. And the select and start, they're the select and start buttons. They work, you push them, and I have to say that all of the controllers showcased in this video truly were plug and play. All I had to do was put the USB cable right into a port, go into the emulator, configure the inputs, and that was pretty much it. So that has been the NES controller. If the question was, would I use it on a regular basis? The answer would probably be yeah. Now that we have the classic, let's go to the sequel, talking about the Super Nintendo controller. To try this controller out, I used the SNES 9X emulator and played Super Mario World. And I mean, just like the previous one, it truly is very similar to the original. As a matter of fact, let's compare it to the Super Nintendo Classic controller. So here we have the RetroPower controller, and then just to the side, you see the Super Nintendo Classic one. And they're very similar, and I have to say that not just in look, but in feel as well. Overall, I have to say that if I like the NES controller, I like this one a lot more as a whole, because the D-pad felt just a little bit softer, not in a mushy sense, it just didn't feel as clicky, but in a really good way. The select and start buttons felt actually a little bit less mushy, and the Y, X, B, and A buttons, they have a very nice shine, very accurate and representative of the original ones, and they're not tough, because some of the cheap controllers that you can buy online, doesn't matter where they come from, when they're really cheap, they actually kind of hurt to use after a while, and I did not have that problem with this one. Okay. So I've been loving the controllers up to this point, but I can't really say the same thing about the Sega Genesis one. It feels mushy and awkward and uncomfortable. I had mentioned earlier that my biggest pet peeve with controllers is whenever they feel mushy, and every button in this controller feels mushy. Now don't get me wrong, it feels responsive and it technically works. Like I played Aladdin using the Gens emulator and it was technically functional, but the D-pad feels a little bit off. I felt like a couple of times I had to be very careful with when I pressed it, because I felt like maybe I would overwalk or underwalk, if that even makes sense. I think you get the point, and that's worth pointing out, because if you're thinking of getting this package primarily for the Sega Genesis controller, then maybe this is not quite it for you. Now keep in mind, this is around $40, and we do have 5 controllers, so 2 good, 1 not so good, so let's keep going, shall we? Okay, now the first 2 controllers are pretty good. Now the Nintendo 64 controller, if you're thinking of getting this package for this one, this alone is probably worth the price of admission. For context, I used the Project 64 emulator for this one, and I used the awesome professional wrestling game known as WrestleMania 2000 to try it out. To the right, that is the RetroPower controller, and then to the left, that is my original Nintendo 64 controller. So look at those, they look pretty much identical. When you close your eyes, you truly could believe that you're holding a legitimate official N64 controller. Talking first about the D-pad, it's probably the most accurate feeling D-pad out of all of them. Now, the thing that I gotta focus on the most is actually the thumbstick. When you look at the inside, they actually changed the way the thumbstick is, so it actually ends up feeling better than the original. It feels a little bit smoother, which hopefully means that you won't have to struggle a lot if you're playing something like Mario Party, how a lot of people used to have this hand cramping injury and they would get bloody hands and Nintendo had to put out a warning label or something like that. Talking now about the start button, it's a start button, and I mean, when you hit it, it takes you to the menu. The shoulder buttons are nice, clicky, and responsive. The Z button's accurate as well. I do love how they actually went out of their way to have the memory card slot in the back, even though there's no actual hardware in there, so that serves no purpose other than, well, to look like an N64 controller. Now, I do gotta point out that although the C buttons and the B and A buttons feel great, they are pretty loud. So if you like a mechanical keyboard, this is right up your alley. But say you're playing at night, you know, you have a significant other sleeping by your side, you're probably gonna wake them up, so avoid button mashers. But if you can skip that, if you can get past that, this is an excellent controller. I mean, I had a lot of fun playing WrestleMania 2000 with this one. It felt awesome, and honestly, this is definitely the main reason that you should consider getting the RetroPie package. And last, and maybe least, we have the PlayStation 2 style controller. So for context, to the right is the RetroPie controller, and to the left is an original PlayStation 2 controller. And color aside, they do look pretty much identical, but unfortunately, appearance is about as far as they go when it comes to similarities, because this controller is pretty stiff. Now, it's worth pointing out that because these are all USB controllers, they don't have to be limited to just emulators. So what I did with this one, because it does have the analog or thumbsticks, I plugged it in, went to Steam, configured the inputs, had no problem with that whatsoever, and I tried a couple of games. The first one being Assault Android Cactus. That's a twin stick shooter, so it's the perfect scenario to try this out. And it's rough. It's rough because it feels like it either moves completely or not at all. It's overly responsive. I could technically play the game, but I did feel very uncomfortable doing so. The second game I tried, and that did go a little bit better because I used the D-pad primarily, was 20XX, which is almost like a Mega Man X style game. And yeah, the D-pad felt great, the buttons felt great, everything except the analog sticks felt like, not like an original controller, but it gets the job done. It's passable considering you're getting the entire package. This is something that you can use. Now, I decided to try because I'm like, okay, analog sticks, I'm primarily a PC gamer. You know, first-person shooters for me are made for PC, but I'm gonna try it out with Left 4 Dead 2. And I gotta say that the footage that you're looking at, I'm not trying to make the controller look bad. I went to the options menu and tried to change the sensitivity. I went to the controller setting, tried to change that as well. I could barely play the game. Just move a little bit and it tried to just go around. I mean, I could not get past the door. So if you're thinking of getting this for first-person shooters on PC, which I'm not sure why you would consider doing that. I mean, hey, if you do that, that's up to you. This is not it. But if you're thinking of getting this for something like twin-stick shooters and having the analog sticks be more like a secondary thing, then this is passable. But overall, I would definitely not recommend you get the RetroPie for this, or perhaps the Sega Genesis controller. So after trying out the 5 controllers and the included 6-foot USB extension cable, which extends the cables, if you were to ask me, Juan, should I consider getting the RetroPie 5 USB Classics controller package for around $40? Suspense right here. I gotta say the answer is yes, because, okay, I gotta start off with the least favorite things, which is by far the PlayStation 2 controller. Do not consider getting this for this. The Sega Genesis controller, I mean, you and I have a weird relationship going on right now. You're a little mushy, but you're functional. You know, the D-pad could have some improvements, but it's something that it's worth trying out. But consider the fact that all 3 Nintendo controllers felt great. I mean, primarily, by far my favorite controller had to be the Nintendo 64 one. This alone is worth the price of admission, or at least consider getting it by itself, because I know that out of all the different consoles to emulate, the N64 is probably the hardest, simply because the controller is so different than the other ones. I mean, think about the fact that the Z button is all the way in the back, so if you were to use something like a PS2 controller, maybe you got to put it here or something. It doesn't feel as authentic, it feels weird, right? So consider that you're getting an excellent N64 controller. you're getting the NES controller, and you're also getting a great SNES style controller. So overall, I gotta say that you should definitely consider at least checking out RetroPie and some of their items. So thank you once again to Mr. Kotaino for lending me your controllers. You can probably have them back. I mean, you know what? Fine. You're gonna get the box back, and I'll put the controllers back in so you can play some of them video games. So thank you to Kotaino, as well as a very special thank you to Mr. Mash188. Both awesome gentlemen supported our 12-hour Extra Life Marathon, which happened recently over at the Press Pause TV Twitch page that my wife and I hosted, because we had a 12-hour marathon in benefit of the San Jorge Children's Foundation for Puerto Rico, and each individual that I'm shouting out right here, right now, donated, get this people, $100 for the foundation. We had an initial goal of raising $200 throughout the entire marathon. We got that, plus $700 in total. So that is absolutely awesome. So the least that I could do is give Mash a shout out. And oh, sorry, Moo, you okay, buddy? You okay? I'm sorry, man. I'm sorry. So we gave Mash a shout out right here. So expect to see Kotaino's name pop up right around here eventually as well. So folks, if you like this video, if you like what I do, if you enjoyed this entire review and you want to help support and build the channel to be bigger, badder, and better each and every day, you can do so by hitting that subscribe button, by hitting that notifications button, by sharing this with your family, with your friends, with your dog. Share it with Moo. I just attacked Moo. Will he be okay? I don't know. We'll find out next episode of Epic JC. So until next time, leave a comment with any suggestions for future videos, and never forget, folks, that this review has most definitely concluded, but the epic journey continues. So thank you for watching, gang. Take care. And people, this is hard right now because usually when I have a box with me, I throw it, especially if it's an unboxing, but this is not mine. So I'll do the same thing as I did with the other video. Like, look, that happened. I did that. Hopefully that's enough. Not really.